Hello and welcome to the Big Time Strength Podcast, a podcast featuring small school strength coaches making the big time where they're at. I am your host, Gage Rozier. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today I'm honored to bring on a really good friend of mine, Coach Jake Niedermann. Jake is the head sports performance coach at Elon University in Elon, North Carolina. There at Elon, he's working with men's and women's basketball, as well as the top assistant for football. Prior to Elon, he's been at Harvard working with all kinds of sports, as well as the head strength coach at Luther College, a Division III school up in Decorah, Iowa. Jake did his undergrad at Central College, like Coach Matt Sager, our last week's episode's guest, and did his graduate degree at Northwest Missouri State, where I had the chance to work with Jake. Jake has some awesome stuff for us today on the show. He talks about leaving your mark on a program, about investing in people, not necessarily equipment, about how his training philosophy has adapted over his experience at different schools and how he works with sports coaches. So some really good stuff from Jake. I appreciate him coming on. And we had some technical difficulties there to start, so he hung in there with me for that. And guys, I know the audio on these interviews isn't the clearest thing you've ever heard ever, and I apologize for that. This isn't natural for me. I'm not a natural computer guy, so it's something I'm working through. I'm trying to get better at. I'm hoping the next few episodes I bring you some better audio, but to me, I mean, you can hear it. It should be fine, but I'm trying to make it the best for you. Trying to balance that between spending too much time on that, trying to be a dad at home too. So it's been a learning experience for me. But anyway, I hope you enjoy the show. Jake's awesome. I'll put all of his contact info in the show notes. So I hope you enjoy. And once again, thanks, Jake, for joining us. Hey, Coach Niedermann, I appreciate you being on with us on the Big Time Strength Podcast. Let's get this rolling, and why don't you give us some information on your journey through strength conditioning, where you've been, where you're at, and also some of the resources you're working with, that type of stuff.
Sure, yeah. So thanks for having me on first. And my journey kind of started at Central College, where I did my undergrad, and same as Matt Sager, who you had on last week. But going through high school, I really wasn't a big dude. I was like 5'7", maybe 160 when I graduated, and I played football and did some other things, but I was kind of soft and pudgy, and hadn't really learned the true value of the weight room until my last couple of years there. And thankfully, we had some football coaches who ran the weight room that were fairly knowledgeable, which definitely helped. But so going out of there, I thought like maybe I wanted to be a computer science major, so I went and visited Iowa State, and it was kind of funny because I walked into their computer science department and met a few people, and it just didn't feel right. And I walked out with my mom, who was on the visit with me, and I turned around, I'm like, hey, we don't have to go on the rest of the visit because I definitely don't want to do this. It just didn't feel right. And thankfully, Central was like 20 minutes down the road from where I grew up in Oskaloosa, Iowa. So I just ended up going to Central, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll do exercise science or something like that, because I liked lifting, I liked athletics, and maybe that was a thing. And I actually think I enrolled as an athletic training major, and my first year there, I was like kind of lost, didn't know what to do, and I talked to the wrestling coach about maybe being on the wrestling team in wrestling, and when I was in the meeting with him, he pulled Coach Jake Anderson, who was the head strength coach there at the time, into the meeting and basically kind of pawned me off on him and said, like, hey, I think this kid would be a good candidate for your intern program. And so he pulled me over to his office and we talked, and we'd actually talked, because I thought about playing football there. We had talked previously, him and my mom in his office, and we got like running on about chiropractic and stuff when we were on a visit. But so yeah, I think I went through their intern program for 4 years, and by the time I was done, I'd already had men's and women's soccer for my last 2 years, running their programs, and super thankful for the intern program there and all the mentors, not just the full-time guys, but, Matt Sager and Charles Friday and all these guys that I grew up with there, and they were a little bit older and just kind of like helped guide me along the way. I don't know what I would have done without, especially like my junior year, Matt Sager's last year. I remember I would mosey down the stairs to the lobby in our dorm, and he would have like coffee ready for me and be like, ready to go? It was like he was my dad or something. It was crazy. But I don't know what I would have done without that. So kind of kept me on track, and definitely helped get me on the right track for strength conditioning and give me the fast track to, getting a graduate assistantship. And thankfully, my my high school football coach, Daryl Schumacher, his son, Ben Schumacher, is actually the assistant director of strength conditioning at Harvard at the time. He's now since moved on to Minnesota football, good old PJ Fleck up there. But thankfully, I got out there to intern my junior summer and had a great experience with Harvard and made a lot of good relationships. And I think everybody from our intern class of that semester is crazy. One of them's in MLS soccer. Luke Lancaster's the assistant director at Abilene Christian. Phil Byers, the head basketball guy at North Texas, and now I'm the head basketball guy at Elon, and I assist with football. So it's crazy that all four of us went on and did some crazy things. But after Central, Coach Schumacher got me hooked up again. He had actually was a GA at Northwest Missouri State before he had moved on to Harvard, and I interviewed with Coach Quinlan, and I remember getting down there for the interview, and I was super nervous. I'd never met the guy. I didn't know what he was like. And when he picked me up, I show up to the weight room. He goes, "Hey, we got to go pick up my kids." And I'm like, "Okay." And we hop in his van, this ancient thing, and we drive and pick Derek, his son, up from school. And that was my interview. And like, we were just talking in the car. And I knew from that point on that I was going to love working for the guy. And the next 2 years were absolutely wonderful. I mean, I spent time with you and Preston, and Brett McGez is now the head guy at Abilene Christian. And something that I think me and Preston and you can be very proud of with Northwest is, I think we all learned a lot from Joe, but we all each left our mark on that program, especially when it comes to the intern program. And I think it's all about, wherever you're at, you say make the big time where you are, you use that mentality and you leave your mark. And I think that's something that we really did well there, that hopefully continues to move on, because you want to give back to all these interns who work for you for free and, are doing the same workload you are, probably more, for no money, and probably like I took out a loan to go out to stinking Harvard. That's one thing I think people don't realize about strength conditioning is that it's tough to get into, when you're on the outside looking in. And so from there, I moved back with my parents after I finished grad school, was applying for tons of jobs. I think I applied for 65 or 70 jobs that summer. And I got a couple interviews, and, towards the end of the summer, I was like, I'm not sure if this is going to happen. And lo and behold, Ike Hammerly, gave me a call, and he was the football coach and football strength coach at Luther College. And I had known him from my hometown because he was the head strength coach at William Penn, prior to that. And he goes, "Hey, we need a strength coach. You should interview for it." I was like, "Great, okay." And so I applied and had a phone interview the next day, a Skype interview the day after that, and then I went on campus that Friday, interviewed, and I started, I might have been the next Monday, if I remember right, which is nuts to think. But I'm very thankful to Luther for giving me that first shot, taking a chance on me, because I was a 24-year-old kid. And they handed me, 19 sport programs and said, "Hey, go with it." And, to me, I think looking back, at the time I was kind of like, my ego was a little high, and I was like, yeah, I deserve this. I got this. And looking back, I was like, oh my gosh, I was just a little kid, man. And I kind of attacked it. And I'm very thankful for having that D3 experience, because it makes you appreciate everything so much more. I tried to build an intern program there and got it kicked off. And after a year, I had planned on being there a while, but a spot came open at Harvard, and I just had to jump on the opportunity. And I've been dating my wife now for like 8 months at the time, and I think it was 8 months, something along there. But I told her, "Hey, I won't take this job unless you want to go with me." And thankfully, she said yes, because now she's my wife, and that was kind of a ballsy move on her part. But we moved out there on a whim, and I took the job in early June, and then we moved there in, I think my start date was like August 1st. So it was crazy. But I was there for 2 years. 1 year was an assistant strength coach, and I got promoted after Coach Megan Routler left for Duke, to assistant director. I was in the assistant director for a role for a year. And then, one of my good friends, Nick DeMarco, he was at the University of Iowa for 4 years. And, 1 is a restricted earnings guy, and 3 is, a full-time assistant under Coach Chris Doyle. But he took this Elon job, and, he had a spot open. He called me and said, "Hey, will you come be my number 2 head guy for head assistant for football, and you're going to manage your own weight room for men's and women's basketball?" And I couldn't say no to it. So it's kind of one of those times when it was just kind of like, okay, everything fell into my lap, and now I'm here. And honestly, it's a lot of fun, just still adjusting and making sure, all my ducks are in a row. But it's been a crazy journey, but definitely a very blessed one, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a lot of awesome stuff there, Jake. And I think
it's a lot of crazy stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff that you were just talking about there that I think is valuable to talk about and think that, you talk about leaving your mark and making your mark. And I know you've done that everywhere you've been, but, they're still running that strength conditioning internship at Northwest, and I'm doing this very similar one here at Williams Jewell College. And that a lot of that started from you bringing there and just that trickle down effect. And then you talked about, I'm not taking this job unless you're going with me. And you found yourself an awesome woman to marry. And I think that's huge too. That if you're getting into this, you better have a wife or a husband that knows what they're getting into. And you got to make the decision about being a family. And it's not just about, job opportunities jumping from shift to shift, but making strategic moves and family moves first too. And I think you've obviously done that, and something I look up to for sure. So, when
you said that, I think it comes down to, having a lot of, I think I read this book a long time ago. I can't remember the exact name, but it's just like having crucial conversations, I think was the name of the book. And, having those conversations with your significant other or, who you're working for, things like that. Having those hard conversations where it might be uncomfortable, might not be something you want to talk about, but if you want to grow and get better and have a stronger relationship, whether it's with your athletes or your significant other, whatever it is, you have to have the conversation. And it's something I think I struggle with as a young coach, not wanting to have that talk with my athletes. But it's funny that I got married and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, like it's the same thing. It's a conversation I might not want to have, but you have to have it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's having crucial conversations. Is that a book? Is that what you said? Is that where you got that from?
Yeah, gosh, it's Crucial Conversations, I think is the title. It's honestly, It's pretty old, maybe 10 years old, but it was a great book. So.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to look into that. So.
Go for it.
All right. So you've been up and down, you've been a lot of different places.
Yeah.
Well, in your short career here, and had a chance to be a head at a D3, and now you're up on the FCS level. So why don't you explain a little bit, maybe some unique ways you've been able to maximize some of your resources you've been working with?
Yeah, I think, especially the older I get, and I said I'm only 26, I'll be 27 in a month, I feel old, but I know that, looking back at my 24-year-old self, if I feel this wise now and have to humble myself, it's going to be crazy 20 years down the road. I can't imagine how some of these 40 to 50-year-old strength coaches, how much wisdom they have. Because it's I wanted to be in your head and you're looking back at your 25-year-old self and thinking, because if I'm thinking I was just like a little kid and it was 3 years ago, I don't know what the heck they're thinking. So, it's all about, I think, a lot of people think about budgets and, investing in facilities and all this new equipment and, if we had one more glute ham raise, man, everything would be so much better and things like that. But I think when it comes down to it, we're looking at the wrong things. And, I think because you just got approved for that GA, right? That'd be Miles, correct? That's a fairly new position.
Yeah, last year.
Yeah. And I think that's where we need to go. We need to invest in people because it's, a lat pull down is never going to change someone's life. And, I think back to my high school weight room. It was terrible, but it was the people that changed my life. And I think too many times we invest in all this new equipment and, all the new gadgets and all this technology like GPS stuff, Catapult is so expensive, or any GPS technology. I'm not ragging on Catapult. We used it at Harvard, but, we're looking to invest in all these things and, that might cost $30,000 a year. Well, that's one more full-time person. Think of how much of a difference that makes. Every single day, if they have one positive interaction with one athlete, that is 100 times more valuable than GPS will ever be to me. And that might save a life. I mean, it's just crazy to think about. And I think too many times we look at, what we have facility-wise or what we don't have, and we try to, like, make that better. And obviously, you need a bare minimum of that stuff to be able to function properly. But once you get to that point, I think it's time to reevaluate, where are we putting our time and resources? And I think you're doing it right there, getting a GA. I mean, I'm sure that's made your life easier. And it's changed his life, giving him opportunities, and it's making your athletes' lives better. They get more attention. So it's a win-win, and too many times we just don't invest in people. And, people are what make the world go round. So I think that's the biggest thing I've learned, and it really hit me in the face, and I didn't really realize it at first. But when I was at Luther, I had 19 sports myself, and I was like, man, I don't know how to do this. And I just kind of fell back on what I knew best, and that was, my experience at Northwest and Central, and it's like, I need to get people to help me. And so I recruited the hell out of everyone around that school and tried to get interns in there. And thankfully, Derek Stork and I had a couple of the guys come in. There's a couple of them that are at GAs at William Penn now, which is kind of funny, but, they're like my right-hand men. And I had, Josie, who was a female basketball player. She was coming in and helping with other sports and things like that. And if I didn't have them, I could not run that program how I wanted to. And especially there, I had a warm-up room that was across the athletic facility from the weight room. So if I wanted to run a warm-up, I would literally run across the athletic facility, which is probably like, a minute at a pretty good clip. And then I'd have to run back to the weight room. And once I got them in there, I could actually just like take a team to the weight room. They could warm the other team up, and it worked really well. And, I think about, I couldn't pay them, but what I could give them was a positive intern experience and teach them the things that I had learned and things like that, and just giving back to them, because without them, none of that would have been possible. So, I think investing in people and, giving back through an intern program, mentorships, whatever you want to call it, that's where I think you're going to get the most value. And, giving back can be so powerful, especially in a profession that's so hard to get into and stay in. So.
Yeah, I think what you said there about investing in people is awesome, because that's what I've always really appreciated and respected about you. Is when I was an intern under you and Joe, it was about developing me as a person, not necessarily, we talk X's and O's of strength conditioning and all that, but it was about growing me as a person, as a coach, and how I can influence others as well. And just that trickle down effect. And yeah, investing in people and putting in a dollar amount on it, like you just said, really kind of put it into perspective for me. Yeah, you can pay $30,000 for his catapult, which is great in training, but athletes 20 years later aren't going to remember their catapult data. They're going to remember maybe that experience with that coach. And again, if you have the resources to have all the bells and whistles, great. That's awesome. But there's nothing that beats just a great coach who impacted your life, and why that internship experience and establishing that, if you're the head guy, is so important, because that's just an easy way for you to invest in people and give back.
Yep, 100%, man.
All right, so what are some ways about improving the training environment? Because we all know the training environment makes the whole lift, right? Are the guys juiced? Are they ready to roll? What are some ways that you optimize that?
So one thing that I did a little bit at Luther, honestly, I didn't do it really. I used it a few times at Harvard and things like that, is, physical contact is a very powerful thing. And by physical contact, I literally mean high fives.
Right.
Just like if you say, hey, after every conditioning rep, you have to give 3 teammates a high five. It seems like so simple and almost fickle, but the second you give a teammate a high five, you're immediately going to say something to them. And then the next one, and it just creates clear communication, whether it's through encouragement, even if it's kind of half-assed, excuse my language, but even if it's half-assed, at least they're having physical contact and interaction so that they're talking to one another. And that's something where, you know, I've really struggled with, because I'm not really a rah-rah guy. I never have been, probably never will be. And that's, honestly, it's kind of funny that I'm like a head basketball strength coach now, because that's kind of a stigma that usually goes with basketball, is that you're kind of a rah-rah guy. And I'm the complete opposite, which is hilarious. But to create that training environment is just to create a team that cares about one another and is going to hold each other accountable to whatever they're doing. If they see a guy skip a rep, call him out. If he is taking false steps in the warm-up or not starting on the line, they call him out. And that's something where, like, currently here, I'm the one that does that. I call them out, I fix them, but the goal is to eventually have it to where I don't say a word, they do it. And I think through that, you create ownership. And that's, I think, a book that's come up before in the podcast is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And I read that. Coach Hafner at Luther, it was a team book, and I read it with the team. And, you know, I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. Why, I can't believe this is just now coming to fruition. And, you know, too many times, you know, he says discipline equals motivation. And I was like, okay, I'm going to test this. And any team that held each other accountable to touching the line and things like that always seemed more motivated. I don't know why. It just must be a thing. And so I've really pushed towards that with little things like touching lines, holding each other accountable, coaching effort to each other. Seems to improve the training environment, not in a fake way, but in a very genuine way. And I've never been a fan of like super hype environments. You know, I hate that word with a passion, but you know, like super rah-rah, yelling all the time. To me, it seems fake and almost a waste of energy. But if you're encouraging one another and holding each other accountable, that is productive, it is positive, and it is something that is going to make everyone better. So when it comes to creating a training environment, I create one of high discipline, making sure everything is done correctly. And it might not be the most exciting lift in your life, but it will sure as hell be the most productive. And that's something I like to take pride in, and I really push towards that. So, and that's kind of how I guess, produce a training environment.
And that's something I strive to do as well. And I think I model a lot of my coaching practices after what I saw you do, and I think we're very similar in nature and in demeanor.
For sure. Yeah,
the whole high five, the whole high five thing is, very simple but very effective as well, and a lot of good stuff there, Jake. Appreciate you sharing
the
that.
first time I did it, I was like, this seems silly, but I'm just going to try it. And they normally were super flat in conditioning, and they ran awesome. And I was like, what the hell? We literally gave high fives. It was like a harder day, too. I was so dumbfounded. It was nuts.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about your training. You know, if you don't know Jake, he's an awesome Olympic lifter. He's a little less than it now. I think, banged up a little bit now, but pound for pound, one of the strongest dudes. He's about my size and about double the weight and everything he does. But what's your training philosophy with your athletes?
So I used to be a huge Olympic lifting guy. And I mean, I competed for 6 years. Some would say a high level. And that definitely reflected in my training. I cleaned athletes from the floor, not always from the floor, but sometimes. We did snatches. Pretty much every team was working overhead. I really didn't jerk with my athletes a whole lot because it was such a demanding movement in the sense of you need side spotters if you're going from the back and things like that. It just didn't seem like bang for buck wise the greatest thing. So I did a lot of that, and then that was kind of up to maybe my first year at Harvard. And when I transitioned to Harvard, I was a huge squatting guy, always loved squatting. And I get there, and I sit down with the wrestling coach, Coach Jay Weiss, awesome dude. I mean, I loved working for that guy. He's exactly what you would want in a sport coach, in the sense that he was like, here's what I expect, and I fully trust you. Do what you can and do what you want. And I was like, dude, yes, okay, I can run with this. And I hope sport coaches hear that and listen to this podcast, because it's like we need trust on both sides. You know, we make them great athletes, and you make them a better soccer player or wrestler. And I think once that's clearly communicated, things get a lot easier. But anyway, got off a tangent. So he goes, look, I've had really bad experiences with my athletes squatting in the past. A lot of low back pain, a lot of knee pain, things like that. Can we try not squatting? And I was thinking in the back of my head, I'm like, oh my God, my weightlifter senses are going off. I'm like, this can't be a thing. This is terrible. This is crazy. Why would we never squat? But there was also this part of me that was like, okay, it's a chance to get better. We'll figure out how we can get around that. And so first thing I did is I pick up Mike Boyle's functional strength training book and I read through it and I come by, the dumbbell RFEs and things like that. I'm like, okay, that's what we're doing right there. It's basically a squat on one leg. Let's do it. And so we would front rack barbell RFE for our main movement and just kind of adapted in that way. And it just made me a lot better strength coach because I all of a sudden had to explore all these different areas of, well, maybe I don't Olympic lift with this team. Maybe we only clean. Maybe we don't squat. And it's funny now, I don't squat any athletes. I didn't squat any athletes my second year at Harvard, which I think seems absurd to a lot of strength coaches. But, they're like, oh, what about the hormone release? What about this? It's like, okay, we'll trap our deadlift and we'll get the same thing. Or, some of my athletes can split squat with more than they front squat. And they're getting the same hormone release, probably more. And it's a single leg movement. So it's even more sport specific if you really want to go down that road with the terms. And the second I figured out that, it's not a my way or the highway thing, you got to adapt and overcome, all of a sudden my mindset shifted. And it's like, okay, let's figure out the most creative ways that we can get better that is going to make them a better athlete. And it became less about myself and Olympic lifting and making my athletes kind of like a mirror of myself. And I think that's a lot of life is just kind of getting over yourself. So, thankfully I finally got over myself. I try to do it every day. And, some days I fail, but some days I don't. So.
Well, I think that's a couple of good examples of, like you said there, adapting and overcoming and not being married to just a certain, philosophy and being open to new things, but also compromising, you're compromising with that sport coach and, but you're still squatting. It's just not the prototypical type of squat. It's a different variation of it, but you're also being very creative and getting the job done for sure still too. So yeah, that's awesome stuff, Jake. Let's talk about what are you excited about learning and improving on this year. I know you're huge on personal development, so I'm excited to hear about kind of what you're diving into right now.
Yeah. So right now, one thing we're doing with basketball, it's called RSI. I might get it wrong because it's still new to me. I'm still learning on it. I think it's Reactive Strength Index. Basically, it's you get this score, and it tells you whether you need to focus on elasticity or strength. So if you're a super springy guy, maybe you need to focus on strength. If you're a really strong dude but not very springy, you focus on this. And it's just a way to measure it. So your RSI score would tell you which you need to focus on. And that's huge for basketball because I get all these guys in that are, super elastic, but they have no strength. And usually, you can kind of see it if you do a depth jump, but the RSI measurement is just super specific and a good metric for it. So that's something we're really exploring here as a department. And that's one thing Coach DeMarco is really good at. He's the director here at Elon, is pushing forward and finding all these new things and really going after it. And that's one thing that I'm really excited about because I think that'll help give us one more thing to use and just another tool to figure out what kids need. And, it's cost effective. It's not 30 grand like Catapult is. Probably produces more valuable info too. But, just pushing on with that and trying to find new ways to figure out what's best for our athletes. One other thing I think that's really cool we're doing here is we're trying to model our department on a high performance model, which is basically like sports performance and sports med are just mirrors of each other, right? We're both equals. We work together. It's integrated. So the director of high performance would be Coach DeMarco, and then the co-director of high performance would be the head athletic trainer. And then from there, it just kind of trickles down. Everyone has their role, and it's more integrated rather than separate. And I think that's something that's really cool that is new to me, and it's pretty new, honestly, to like the United States. And I think it's a great way to meld those two, athletic training and strength conditioning that have always been butting heads. It's a good way to meld them together and give the athletes better service. And that's something I'm also like really excited to dig into and figure out, what the best structure is and things like that. Because I think, when it comes to training and philosophy-wise and movement-wise, there's nothing really new under the sun. Everyone talks about, APRE and all these training systems. Like it's been around for so long. It's just been repackaged and repurposed. And the same thing with like RPR. Manipulating the neurolymphatic system has been around for ages. Chiropractic has been doing it for forever. But you package it in a system that's for athletes, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I need to go get that, And which is great. Like I'm actually probably going to get RPR certified, but it's not new. You just got to dig. And those are two things I'm really looking forward to digging into.
Well, that's cool. Trying to find ways to make your department flow how it needs to and integrate and communicate and all that good stuff. Mm-hmm. That's exciting and interesting to see what you guys come up with there. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
You're always one too to give out some great resources. You put me on to a lot of great books. What are some of your favorite ones, whether, books or articles or whatever that maybe our listeners should check out? Sure.
I'll be honest. I'm actually a pretty big slacker when it comes to reading raw strength conditioning material. They always say there's like, it's an art and a science. I'm really, really pulled towards the art side. I hate reading like nonfiction books and things like that. It's really dull to me. And thankfully, I surround myself with people that love that stuff. So like Coach DeMarco digs into all that stuff and he's all about it. Brandon Robinson, one of our assistants here, is kind of the same way. Like he's reading Triphasic right now. If I read the whole Triphasic book, I'd probably want to puke. So I'm really, really big into the art side and the people side, obviously, given, what I've said. But, one of the best books I've ever read is The Traveler's Gift. And that's one book that definitely changed my life. Probably one of my favorite books of all time. Andy Andrews in general is an awesome author. Pretty much any book he reads or writes is gold. His best two are definitely The Traveler's Gift and The Noticer. Two great books for young and upcoming coaches to learn how to live and how to manage people. And besides those two, Extreme Ownership, 100%, got to read it. It's a must read no matter what. Let's see, one more. Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman. There was a time in my life, I read it when I was at Central, but when I started getting more competitive with weightlifting, I had never really been great at anything, and I was pretty good at weightlifting, and it got my ego very inflated. Like, I look back now, and I was a little egotistical prick, to be honest, and it definitely ate me up. And that book, when I revisited it, it's a lot about it's about a gymnast who's coming back from an injury and meets this guy who changes his life. And I had been struggling with injuries, and I needed to master my own mind, and that's basically what it was about: is mastering your mind and being able to hold yourself accountable and not need other people for that. And that's something that changed my life, because being able to self-reflect and actually call yourself out is a life-changing thing, and you still need other people for it, but if you, at the end of the day, lay down in bed and you can actually think in your mind, I was kind of let my ego get the best of me today. I need to be better at that tomorrow. You're already halfway ahead. So definitely those books for sure are must-reads in my opinion.
No, that's perfect, man. That's a lot of good stuff there. I've read a couple of those. Those are other ones that are on my list. A couple of those too. So awesome, man. Well, this has been great. I know you got to get to a group here pretty quick, so let's wrap it up.
Freshman, baby. Got to lock them in.
Yeah, there you go. I got a few quick questions with you. It's a little rapid fire here. Let's bring it home, okay? All right, so favorite office snack?
Favorite office snack? Well, currently sitting next to me is those little flattened pretzels. And if you go to Costco, there's these things called Aussie Bites. and it's like quinoa, oats, some nuts, and a bunch of other stuff like packed in this little bite. I'm telling you, you can make them at home, look them up online. Best snack you could ever have. They're good for you, and they taste wonderful.
Nice. What were they called again?
It's a Aussie Bite. AUSSIE.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'll check those out. I'm looking for new snacks. So that's perfect. All right. Favorite caffeine source? I know you're a coffee drinker. Anything else?
Dude, coffee all the way. And honestly, my wife is a big coffee fan. And I used to drink just straight up Folgers coffee, and she's turned me into a coffee snob. So now I have to drink expensive coffee, otherwise I think it tastes like crap. So I guess I'm just going to have to keep getting higher paying jobs so I can afford the coffee now.
Yeah, there you go. What is your favorite workout playlist?
Favorite workout playlist? Oh, man. I'm a big country guy, so if it's like anything old school country, definitely not that new stuff. I can dig that. But if I need like a pick-me-up, feel-good playlist, Guardians of the Galaxy Radio on Pandora will always leave you feeling great.
All right. Haven't heard that one before. I'll check that out. That's good. All right, 2 more. We got 15 minutes to train. What are you doing?
15 minutes to train. Let's see. I am probably doing a couple sets of dumbbell jump squat and super heavy safety bar hand-supported split squats.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm going real heavy with those suckers.
Nice. It used to take you 15 minutes to warm up for your cleans back when I knew you. So.
Yeah, now I think I could actually, like, my body's healthy enough that I could just grab those and go and not feel broken. But,
nice.
Yeah. Probably took me longer than 15 minutes, to be honest.
Yeah, it did. All right, last one. What's a small school strength coach or just a strength coach maybe we don't know about who's just killing it and they deserve a shout out?
Gosh, Matt stole mine, man. He took Corey Van Wyk from me. Shoot. Oh, let's see. Let me think. Small school guy that deserves a shout out. It depends on what you consider small. But I would say, if I'm thinking about my buddies over at Harvard, Luke Osberg is the basketball guy over there, and the dude is just like hustling. He, this past offseason, traveled with men's basketball and had like 6 sports on top of it and was in football offseason with every lift group. So the dude was just like motoring the whole time. And he definitely deserves a shout out because, traveling with basketball is no small task, let alone doing your other job duties on top of it. So big shout out to him for just like locking in and grinding through that stuff because it's not easy.
No, that's awesome. I'll have to check Luke out and actually reach out to Corey, have him on the show hopefully somewhat soon. So there's a couple great guys. Yeah, we need to check out. So, all right, Jake.
Sure.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I've got your email and your Twitter handle here. Is there any other way you prefer to be contacted if someone gets a hold of you?
No, that's the best, man. Email, Twitter, whatever, doesn't matter, and I'll always get back to you. Just give me a little time if I'm busy.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll put those on the show notes. So thanks, man. Appreciate it. A lot of great stuff. And good luck there, Elon. Get things rolling. And take care, man.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you later.